Hey guys, it's been a while, but we're back in the shop again. And today, what we're doing is preseason checks. I've actually been bringing in all of our models one at a time through the shop. We take them apart, open them up, go over, give everything a good, thorough beginning of the season pre flight. Right now, I've got my Extreme Flight 91-inch Extra NG on the bench, on the stand. And I thought I would give you a walkthrough of what I like to do to give you some ideas of how to go through it. So you can see what I've done is I've brought it in the shop, put it up on the plane stand, and took the prop off and pulled the cowl, right? So this is obviously a gas motor. We got a DA70 in here with the 2-into-1 MTW canister. So what I like to do is give them a thorough going over, bring it in the shop. First thing, check over everything, look over the covering, get out your iron, and shrink any wrinkles or loose spots. Just use medium heat, go easy. Most folks know how to shrink covering, so I'm not going to go through that in too much detail. So you want to look over all of that, all your covering. While you're looking over covering, especially look for loose spots where it's pulled up. Edges, like here, around the canopy, anywhere where the design has got points, tends to be places where it'll start to pull up. You also want to look to see if you've got your hinge line sealed, that your sealing tape is good and hasn't started to peel up. That's the place where you're going to see it a lot, especially on gas models. On the bottom of the wings and the stabs where you're getting oil splatter, you want to check, clean that up, look it over. Next thing I do after I pull the cowl off, I check over the engine. So I like to get out my Allen wrenches, make sure the mounting bolts, just give a few of them a snug to make sure the mounting bolts are tight, especially make sure your muffler or header bolts are tight. Double check your carb. It's really good to use a torque wrench for this. I keep a small torque wrench with a cheat sheet with the values for all the different large screws that I use. Pull one or both plugs and take a look at the condition. This will give you a good sanity check if your engine's been running well over the last season. We don't have a lot of runtime on this one, and that's pretty clean. What you want to avoid is if it's either black and oily, that means you're running too rich, or if it's like white and ashy looking, that means you're running too lean. So if it's a good, just generally lightly sooty, brownish black color, that's pretty good. It's a good sanity check, so just take a look at them, see if they need a clean. You can double check the gap, although I've never seen the gap just drift from time. So I looked that over. Got a simple baffle here. If you have trouble with baffling, really great thing to check out is Terry Wiles' video on how to make do-it-yourself baffles with Durice craft foam. It's on YouTube, just look it up. That's how this is made. Literally make this in 5 minutes by just cutting some pieces with a scissors and gluing them up with CA. It's much easier than it sounds. So anyway, I check all that over. When I go back to put the cowl back on, make sure everything is tight. You will naturally in the process check to see if any of your cowl screws are loose, and also retorque your prop for the season. You want to look over your prop, make sure it's in good condition, doesn't have any nicks or chips from like hitting something. Double check that. Oh, you might notice I paint my tips. Not everybody does that, but I like to do that because it's a really good visual indicator to be careful around that prop when the engine's running, when you can see the disc. So you can do that if you want. I like to do it. Double check your balance. It's up to you. Then I move back, check all your fuel tank plumbing. In this case, I did find one problem, that the fill line, the little rubber grommet where it passes through this side former here, just split. So I'll replace that before I put it back so we don't rub through this. So check all your lines, make sure everything's tight, look for signs of anything that's seeping. You notice I safety wire some of them. I don't bother to safety wire the vent. It's not really going to bother anything. I've never seen that leak, but I do safety wire my carb lines. And I love to use a 3-line system with filters in my gas can, filters on the fill line. Sometimes I'll even put a filter on the vent so it's not sucking dirt. I don't put anything in line to the carb. I don't use T's for fillers. I don't put any filters there because that's just more places to suck an air bubble and leak. If you're using this filter and you've got a filter on your filler can, and there's also the screen and the carb, you're filtering more than you need to. You're filtering 3 or 4 times, and that's good. We don't want any air bubbles, any leaks. Obviously, I've checked the other end where the line goes in the carb, make sure everything's good, look for seepage, things like that. Go back here, just give a little tug on formers and things everywhere you can to make sure that no glue joints have worked loose. You want to take your driver and make sure that your servo screws are still tight. Look and make sure that your pull lines, if you've got them, have tension. If you're using direct linkages and everything, just double check, make sure everything's tight. Check over your electronics. Look at all your wires, checking for places where you may have some chafing or rubbing, or something has connection has pulled loose. I'm in pretty good shape here because, as you can see, I wrapped everything, and I like to use grommets where it passes through those holes in the mounting plate. All my connections are either glued right here. See, I run a dab of goop, or you can use hot glue or shoe glue or something like that to glue all the connections going into the receiver. And anything else that plugs together, I use keepers. These kind of keepers. They're cheap. These days I buy them by like the bag of 100 off of, I forget even where I got these. Everybody makes them, right? So just double check everything is good. In this case, I'm using LIFE batteries because I'm more of like an iMac, old school, slow 3D type of flyer. I'm not XA, so I don't need the power of LiPo. And these batteries can stay in the plane year round. This actually lives in my trailer. It just stays out all winter. A123 LIFEs, they don't care. They'll live through anything. But I will cycle test them. So I'll put them on the charger, charge them full, discharge them, and I'll compare that to the capacity when I bought them. And you can probably see these labels when I buy batteries. I use my label maker and I put the date and I put the initial measured capacity. Not the label, but I actually measured. And I'll compare what I've got today to that. Should be fine. I think the general rule of thumb in the old days was you got to toss them when you lose something like 15% capacity from new. A123s, that's a decade. So I'm not too worried, but I do check them every single year. Looking over this, I did find a couple other things I need to fixing. So you can see I've got my battery strapped down on a piece of foam, but there's actually this one here was rubbing against the edge of the former. I didn't realize it was tight there. So a quick fix for that is I undid the straps and I put a piece of rubber electrical tape there just so it doesn't rub. So I go through, check over all of that, make sure everything looks good, no loose glue joints, everything's tight, double check lots of screws. Same thing with the tail. All your control surfaces, give them a good yank to make sure that the hinges are tight and nothing needs to be re-glued. I will bring the wings and the stabs down, do the same thing, check everything, make sure it's tight, look it over. What else? Sometimes, here's another one. A lot of the newer designs from EF and Skywing and others give you these nice tubes that are pre-installed to run the leads, the servo leads down to the tail. Front edge of that plastic tube can act like a saw and cut you wire. So double check that where they're coming out of that, you don't have any chafing. I actually ran into that problem on my Pitts biplane where at the tail end, where the wires came out of the other end of the tube, going into the servos, they were starting to rub. And in that plane, the servos are actually mounted in the fuse and the stabs are pretty much, you can remove them, but I leave them on all the time. Almost lost it because they started rubbing back there. So what I did is I opened it up. I fixed it by stuffing some foam into the end of the tube to keep the ends of the wires isolated. And I actually, on the bottom, cut away some of the colored film and put a piece of clear. So I made kind of an inspection hatch like you'll see on full size. So you want to double check all that. What else? Your quick releases. You planes with quick releases, those are wonderful. Double check everything's tight, put your wings on, make sure they're properly adjusted. Almost everybody that does quick releases does give you some kind of a system to adjust them. So the extreme flight type that are these metal sliders, the knurled end of the screw head or whatever you're going to call it that comes in and get captured, there's a jam nut and you can loosen that up and turn that in and out to adjust how tight it is. On the Skywing types that are usually like a dome-headed screw and a carbon plate that grabs it, you can turn those things in and out. I will tell you on Joey's 35cc, we've had to adjust the stab tension a few times because it loosens up over time. Pilot's pretty easy because most of pilots are just a a slider and a thumb screw that you just leave the thumb screw captive, and it's just so you're tightening that every single time, so you don't have to worry about it. But anyway, you want to check all of that. Just check everything you can think of. Get the whole thing a once over. Are you looking for anything that may have started to work itself loose, vibrate, wear out? And it's a good time to do this once a year and catch all this stuff before it becomes a problem in the air. Also, clean it. I give it a good cleaning. I wax everything that can be waxed, like the cowl, the wheel pants, the canopy, get all the oil residue off and so forth, and hopefully have a great season. So I hope that helps. Any other questions, tips, suggestions, please throw them in the comments. So thanks a lot, guys.